one of the big friendship problems isn't that there's something wrong with us. It is actually not necessarily the way we socialize. So this is big revolutionary stuff. It is this mismatched communication, and it is this mismatched expectations.
Yeah.
And when we tell people this, and by the way, when I tell people this advice, no one takes this advice. I'm like, oh, what you have to do is explain where you're coming from. So many people are like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, I know, but it helps.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Jude, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am thrilled to welcome you to tonight's event with Caroline Maguire, discussing her work, Friendship Skills for Neurodivergent Adults, a guide for the anxious, uniquely wired, and easily distracted, in conversation with Brendan Mahan. Caroline Maguire is an expert in social-emotional learning and a keynote speaker who has presented at venues that include the International Conference on ADHD, Learning Disabilities of America, and the Association of Speech Pathologists. In her work, Friendship Skills for Neurodivergent Adults, Caroline Maguire addresses the differences in neurodiverse brains that make friendship less intuitive, from managing the logistics of fulfilling social life to difficulty with self-regulation. Caroline Maguire navigates these differences in 3 parts: how friendship works, how to find your people, and how connecting will get you in motion. Brendan Mahan hosts the ADHD Essentials podcast and is the author of the upcoming book, Overcoming the Wall of Awful. He has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, How to ADHD, and other outlets. Please join me in welcoming Caroline Maguire and Brendan Mahan. All right, here we go.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I have a book launch today, so I'm pretty good.
I know. My favorite thing, that without even intentionally doing it, we're starting at 7:06, which is how it should always go with neurodiverse events. They should always start a little bit late. So I'm like, yes. So Caroline and I have known each other for years and years and years. And I am incredibly proud of my friend because she is now a 2-time author, and that's a big deal. Your first book was about like kid friendships.
Yes.
And now you've moved into adult friendships from a neurodiverse lens.
Right.
Why?
So when I wrote While No Play With Me, publishers would not let me publish a book with diagnostic labels. So While No Play With Me is about executive function, the management system of the brain that fuels all of our diagnostic labels, but they would not give me a book deal at a major publisher with those labels. And so I played along. And then in the interim, we got, Dr. Ned Hallowell, who some of you may be familiar with, had always been able to publish those kind of books. But like, he's still #1 on Amazon for all ADHD books. So not all of us are him. But in the meantime, some big books came out. Our friend Jessica McCabe, some big books came out, and the publishers suddenly said, oh, you guys are a thing.
Yep.
And so truth be told, I have been trying to write this book for 6 years. But finally, basically since the pandemic, there's been this boom of interest. And the community has really been pushing me to write this book the whole time. And then supporters like Dr. Ned Hallowell, like Ned was like, this book must happen, you must do it. And he helped me get in front of the right people.
I'm going to ask the question that I suspect is hiding inside of the brains of a lot of people watching this.
Okay.
Maybe people in the audience, probably not because you're here, but certainly people who might be watching this. I'm fine. I know how to make friends. It's just that everyone else stinks. How would you reply to that barrier?
I mean, look, it's really hard. We were talking about this while we were walking here. It's really hard to go there, right? Like, this is a really hard thing. I started out, thanks to the many bullies in my life, having realized that I wasn't great at friendship. I'm not thanking them, by the way. This is not a formal thank you to them, but I was pretty isolated as a kid. So I kind of came to the realization by like age 12, like, I need help with this. I'm not great at this. But it's hard to turn toward anything that's so vulnerable. And some people in the world do stink, right? And there are people who are mean. Like clients tell me stories all the time where I hear what the other person said and I think there was no need to say that. There was no need to be that unkind. My Nana would have said, filter that, dear, but I really think some people do stink, but I think one of the biggest things is that our brain does things differently. And I don't think we need to be different. I think we need to approach this differently and understand our brain. If you understand your brain, then it's a lot easier to navigate this. You're going to read?
You're queuing me up.
Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't do this on purpose, guys.
So this is one of my favorite parts of the whole book. It comes really early, page 5, for those of you reading along. Before we go any further, let's talk about the fact that often it feels like other people make friends so easily, and that hasn't been your story. You may wish to be like your neurotypical buddy because you think things are easier for them. But here's the truth. There's no trick to making friends, and no one is born with a superpower to make friends. It's a skill that anyone can learn with effort. I encourage you to shed that belief that making friends should be easy. This is a shift that will make everything else I'm going to share with you in this book easier to absorb. I just want to, one, obviously call attention to that quote and the idea that making friends is a skill. And like any skill, it's going to be hard. And I want to point out, you started just now saying I was bad at making friends when I was 12 and it was really hard. This is 10 years ago at this point, but I presented at one of the ADHD conferences and Caroline welcomed me into the ADHD community after that workshop. So you've gotten better, right? Like you're very good at it. I just had dinner with you and your friends, myself included. It is a skill that can develop, and you're sitting here as evidence that it can
I am
develop.
living proof.
Right. So what are some of the basic concepts that the folks watching or sitting here with us today need to be aware of when it comes to building friendship making as a skill?
I think one of the biggest things does go to mindset. Like 12-year-old Caroline is sometimes in charge, and I talk about this in the book. When Caroline, 12 years old, is in charge, it's not a great thing. And we have to heal that part of ourselves because she does something that I talk about in the mindset chapter called fortressing, which means that, and anybody may laugh who knows me, the drawbridge goes down, but then you mess up and my drawbridge goes right back up. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really going to give you a second chance because you just proved, there's no 3 strikes. It's like 1 strike. But I think like part of this is to look at your mindset, right? The other thing is I think that we don't love communicating about who we are and how we think because we feel like typical people, we're always having to communicate, we're always having to explain. But I gotta say, one of the biggest things I've learned on this journey personally, but also writing this book and talking to hundreds of people and interviewing them for this book is that the more we say things like, hey, I sometimes forget that you exist, but I still like you, or I forget to text back. Could we put this on autopilot? Could we meet regularly? Do we have to always reschedule everything? Like the more we communicate, the more we are able to keep up those friendships. And I think that's a huge thing. And again, that's a mindset shift because we're afraid to say those things.
Yeah.
But by not saying them, we have to remember that the other person is then in the dark. They know nothing about what's going on in our minds. So they're assuming like, I guess I thought we hit it off, but they haven't written me. I wrote them, right?
Yeah.
Versus, hey, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at responding. Like it's not you. And it also, I think, ends the shame cycle, which is the other piece of this. There's so much shame around these topics. And I think the more that we understand ourselves and that we do friend differently, the less that shame piece comes in. And that shame piece is the piece that keeps that drawbridge up, right? It's really about shame.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And when we did the interview for my podcast that is up as of today, one of the things we talked about was we did the parallel between allergies and just working at differently social skills, right? Like in both cases, you have to express a need in order to get your needs met.
Right.
And so I agree. It's critical. Can we move over to, this is towards the end of the book, where you talk about assessing friendship levels?
Yes.
Because the only way to move someone from one level to another level is to know that those levels exist. And the only way to meet someone where they are is to know those levels exist. Because I've certainly been way too friendly with people who I had just met, because I was like, part of how my brain works is there's like a friend switch that happens, and I'm like, that person's great and my friend. And not always. Sometimes that person is like, who are you? And other times I'm interacting with someone, I'm like, this person's fine, I kind of vaguely know them, and they're like ready to take to the next step and be closer friends or be actual friends. And I don't even know that because I'm missing the signals. So can we play there a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the things that I realized a few years ago was, one, a lot of neurodivergent people don't understand that there are levels of friendship, and they're giving the attributes of a friend to someone who's an acquaintance. And so when that person cancels coffee, they're saying, my friend canceled coffee. And that automatically triggers a rejection sensitivity. It makes you feel so bad.
Hold on. What's rejection sensitivity?
Oh, okay. Rejection sensitivity is when you haven't necessarily been rejected, but you perceive a rejection. And it's a real thing. It's studied. It's,
It hurts more.
It hurts more. And that perception makes you, often have a trauma response, but a lot of times it makes you just feel everything more. And it's based on sometimes even a perceived rejection. So you text, no one texts back. You decide and feel and have a story that you've been rejected. But have you really been rejected? Right? It's really hard because we have a history of rejection.
Right.
Right? So again, 12-year-old Caroline shows up, and again, she's not a reliable narrator, right? Because she's like, we've been rejected, right? And it's not necessarily the case. So in the case where you attribute someone as a friend when they're an acquaintance, what ends up happening is you also imbue them with these characteristics of a friend, and you give to them as a friend. And a lot of what people say to me is, I give and give and give in friendship, and I don't get back. And that can be completely true, even when you know the levels and everything is true. But a lot of times what I find is it's because we're jumping in, we're going into what I call the impulsive friendship cycle. And it's because we had a click or a zing, and we don't zing with everybody, right? So we don't always have that great moment where you say, oh, you too, right? Mm-hmm. And then because of that zing, we have this emotional moment. And we move from that emotional moment that is great to, this person's my best friend. We're going to run through the flowers together and we're going to be together forever, right? And in that, I totally understand how that happens. I am writing about the impulsive friendship cycle because I have been there. But what I think is important is that there are these levels of friendship. And they start with acquaintance, and then I have you move into an emerging friend, right? So somebody like you're getting along with, you're spending time together. And then I move into friend. And then there's close, confidant, lifelong pals, right? Now, those people you only get, research shows, 2 or 3 in your life. So that doesn't mean, you meet someone new and they become a close confidant and you like cancel out someone and they have to leave the bench or something. But it does mean that when people want all their friends, a neurodivergent trait is we want all our friends to be really close to us. We don't really love the acquaintance thing. We don't love small talk. But the problem is that it takes a lot of time. So we just have to understand that pacing, that it takes time and repeated investment to move through those levels. And this is the hard part. Sometimes it falls apart, right? And it doesn't work. And that's the hardest part. But I talk about this in the book. There's ways to, nurture so that you're looking at and meeting different people. It's not just one person.
Yeah. You mentioned small talk.
Yes.
In the book, it's this flag right here for those of you watching from home. Why small talk matters.
Yes.
Why does small talk matter?
Okay, so again, a lot of neurodivergent people don't love small talk. We think it's boring. I myself used to have this attitude completely. I fully say I resemble that remark. But the thing about small talk is it's how you get to know people. So it can be boring and it can be about the weather. And I do a lot in this book to teach you how to make small talk interesting. But part of it is that you get to choose your friends. And I know this is like a revolutionary concept, but you get to choose your friends. And in doing that, you also get to feel them out and get to know them. And I think the most important chapter in the book is, how do I know if someone will be a good friend? And what I want you to do with small talk, and this is just my humble opinion, is to get to know people and figure out if they are worthy of being your friend. How do they treat you? How do they treat other people? Right? Like, I was a waitress. How do they treat waitresses? Right? That's a flag, right? Are they nice to people? And then as you get to know them, you also can nurture that friendship more because, for instance, I'm going to do this right now. You're not the droid I'm looking for, right? Like, if I say that to you, you know that I am a Star Wars fan and that we are each other's people, right?
And if I know what you're talking about, it turns out I am the droid you're looking for.
But I mean, that's part of small talk, right? And it's the part we don't really, it's why it's a skill, right? And I talk a lot in the book about how to make it interesting, how to use it to your advantage, that kind of thing, because I always talk to people, and I talked to so many people who are good at small talk, and I would be like, if my poor husband is here, I would be like, we're at the dinner table with people, and I'm like, by the way, you're good at small talk. What do you use small talk for? Do you want to talk about that? And that was something that people said to me over and over again, like, well, it has a purpose. And then I went and did research, and it does actually have a purpose.
And when you were talking earlier about neurodiverse folks tending to want to jump into the deep end, one of the thoughts I had was that one of the risks of that is when two neurodiverse people meet each other and they're both ready to jump into the deep end. And is that a good choice, right? So small talk is a way for those two neurodiverse people to kind of figure out if the deep end is where they want to be, which will maybe be hard for them to do. But it's figuring out where we are and how to meet each other where we are is an important component to all of this. Regardless of where in the depth of the friendship pool you're trying to go, you still have to kind of work your way in.
Well, and I have a story for that and a method for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we were writing the book, I just kept thinking, I have to explain how to share and nurture a relationship because it's something people really want. And so this is called the ice cream scoop method. So I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I don't offer a scoop of ice cream to share. I'm giving people like the entire tub of ice cream, and I'm sharing everything, my social security number, my family's history of trauma, like anything. And I've really worked on oversharing. But I think then when you've worked on oversharing, you're like, well, then how do I share and nurture a relationship? Because this lady told me that you move through the stages of friendship and you nurture these relationships. There's different levels. And so I like to think of it as a scoops of ice cream. I share a scoop and then you share a scoop.
Yep.
But if you share no scoops back to my share, then again, I'm not going to take it personally, right? And that's the hard part. What I'm going to do is share in line with that and then, wonder about how much I want to share. But most of the time people are sharing in line with what you're sharing. And so, it just moderates us a little bit. And I have a whole elaborate section on this. I'm simplifying it. But the idea of like nurturing the friendship, we have to share and we have to use small talk and we have to use communication to get to know someone. And that's hard because we are worried about oversharing.
Yeah. So one of the things that I just want to make sure that the audience is noticing as we talk, right? There's a lot of skills involved in making friends. It's why it's the second word in the title, right? And these are not skills that we get taught. These are not skills that like get explicitly instructed. We stumble across them and learn them by accident or learn them because we get bullied into submission because we did it wrong or whatever. This book teaches these skills. And as a guy who's clearly read it and have taken flags out. I really just want to take a second and put the book itself over. Like, I guess I want to make sure that I'm asking you questions and people know you're an expert. But you're not going to be comfortable doing this, and it doesn't faze me at all. I'm a big nerd former English teacher, so one of the middle school English too. So one of the things that I really care about is how accessible a book is, particularly for folks who are neurodiverse. Is this a book I can flip open and sort of access any random page and be able to get something meaningful out of it? That's pretty important to me. This book does that. Are you better off probably if you read it from page 1 on? Yeah, probably. But if you are neurodiverse, are you going to do that? Probably not. So I want you to know that this book will do what you need it to do, right? It can be a book that you read from cover to cover. It can be a book that you use as a reference. It can be a book that you just sort of pick up randomly because it sits on your coffee table and you pick it up every other week or whatever and get the meaningful, important things out of it. This book is phenomenal. I have been lucky enough to read 2 books in the last 3 weeks that I fell in love with, and this was one of them. Not because my friend Caroline wrote it. I mean, yes, because she's amazing, but it's not because she's my friend that I like this book so much and that I'm putting it over to the degree that I am. I'm putting it over because it's amazing. So I just want to make sure that I say that out loud, because I don't want to put you in the position to have to do that.
I would not be able to do that.
I've no skin in the game for me. There's no kickbacks or anything. It's a really wonderful book. One of the things that I think we should talk about, because I just totally took mine off, is masking.
Okay, let's talk
Can
about
we
it.
play with that a little bit? What does that mean as it relates to neurodiversity and friendships and those sorts of things?
So masking is something that even typical people do, which is that but in neurodivergent terms, it means suppressing your neurodivergent traits and basically pretending they don't exist. So instead of me moving around and fidgeting all the time, I would pretend I don't fidget. I would, instead of saying that you have needs or that can't sit in the sun, it gives me a headache, or I have sensory issues, you would suppress them. And it's basically trying to fit in to societal norms, but doing it at a very high personal expense. And there's a lot of research that's emerged that shows that masking actually leads to terrible mental health outcomes. However, if you grew up in a time when it wasn't okay to stim or it wasn't okay to do certain things, or if you grew up in an environment where you didn't know about your neurodiversity, which is most people on the planet, we often fell into this masking. And I talk about my own unmasking in the book, and there's degrees. It's a spectrum. So everyone wears different personas, right? Like, there's work Caroline, there's, I went on TV today. Television Caroline is very abbreviated. Like, she is terse. She is to the point. But I think what happens is it's not adapting because you're taking on this other persona. And, one of the examples a friend of ours gave is that she would pretend to like things she didn't really like. So if you were like, do you want to go to a basketball game? Well, unmasked Caroline's like, sorry, no, I'm not into that. But a masked person would be like, that sounds great. Let's build our entire relationship around basketball because, I want to be around you and I want you to like me, so I'm going to pretend. Or I don't have any sensory issues and I'm just suppressing them. And it's a big, big thing in the neurodivergent community. And unmasking is a journey. It takes time. I talk about it in the book. I don't want anyone to feel shame. So I want to say that there's lots of, and I have this on my podcast, the ADHD Social Playbook, where I talk about and interview people who have done the unmasking, and it takes them literally years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard, right? Because it means you got to give yourself permission to be your neurodiverse self and be quirky or intense or disconnected or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Can we talk about neurodivergent communication styles and what
Sure.
those look like?
Sure.
Awesome.
So one of the things that everybody probably realizes is that there are different ways to communicate, but one of the things that has really emerged in the past few years, and I'm thrilled about this, is that there are different communication styles for neurodivergent people. For instance, ADHD people, we will often tell you a story that seems to have no connection to what you just shared. But really what's happening is you told me a story, I relate to that story, and I actually am going to come back around and relate back to you, right? So you say to me something really hard, like, my mom's in the hospital or my father's in the hospital, and I start telling you a story about myself, and you're like, what is she doing? Why is she telling me this story about herself? I just told her this hard thing. But really, it's that I'm trying to relate to you, and I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. We often get lost on side quests while we're telling that important story.
Yep.
So there's the telling the story, and then there's the side quests where our stories aren't linear necessarily. And sometimes when I'm telling you that story I want to relate to, I get lost and I tell you some other story.
So like I tell you about my dad being in the hospital and you tell me a story about a time when you broke your arm, intending to get to you in the hospital, but you don't quite get to you in the hospital and it doesn't circle back to what's going on with my dad.
And then you're like, does she have empathy? What's wrong with her?
Right.
The other thing is info dumping. So info dumping is when you share a large amount of information about a special interest. And that is something we've really come to realize in the past few years is something neurodivergent people do. And it can be sort of like a lot of information, right? So like, for instance, I'm obsessed with the royals. I have read and watched everything there is to know. If you'd like to know anything about Prince Andrew, I know. And I watch British television now, right? Okay, I'm down the rabbit hole. I read the Epstein files. Like, I've done it all. And what happens is we are using that also as a way to share and connect. So what I teach my clients is to sort of flag that and to say, I really like what you just said made me think of something that I'd really like to share. Mm-hmm. Or that reminds me of something. And that way people aren't like, what is she talking about? That came from left field. Like, why is she telling me all this information? It frames it up for people and they understand. Or to even explain, I'm neurodivergent. I love to share this information. What you said just made me so excited.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we meet someone and they say something and we're like, oh my God, you love the Royals too. And we go into this whole tangent.
Which is fine if you're at a Royals convention and that's expected.
But
if you're at a coffee shop, maybe not so much.
No one's asking me. I know, no one really asks me about all my knowledge. It's just there.
How come no one wants to know about the Royals?
There are people. It's just they're on the internet. But so those are a few of the neurodivergent communication styles. And what happens is they are the way we share and the way we connect with people. But and this is well researched, many people aren't expecting that or they don't know. And so a big problem or struggle that we have is literally mismatched expectations. So there have been a lot of studies in the past few years that show that the neurodivergent, one of the big friendship problems isn't that there's something wrong with us. It is actually not necessarily the way we socialize. So this is big revolutionary stuff. It is this mismatched communication and it is this mismatched expectations.
Yeah.
And when we tell people this, and by the way, when I tell people this advice, no one takes this advice. I'm like, oh, what you have to do is explain where you're coming from. So many people are like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, I know, but it helps. But that's literally what the research shows. And that's my personal experience. My personal experience is that by flagging things or explaining or saying, I'm going to come back around. I'm not just telling a story about my broken arm for the sake of it, that people really understand and that they, saying I have sensory issues. So this is where I'm coming from. They understand and they're pretty accepting. Not everybody, but if they're not accepting, then they're not your people.
Yeah.
Right? And they're not kind.
It's no small undertaking to write a book.
My family would say the same.
It's a lot of work. What are you hoping the world gets from this book?
I have a big goal.
Yeah.
It's lofty.
That's okay.
I want everybody to have a friend. I want all the people. I want to retire. I want to do the work I do. And then someday they're like, well, we don't need you anymore. Mm-hmm. We've solved this problem. little kids make friends and they're accepted and they grow into middle schoolers and they grow into high schoolers and they grow into adults. And we no longer need to have a Caroline.
Awesome. I'm with you. Yeah, that's great. Second question about the book.
Okay.
What are you most proud of? Is there a piece of it? Is it the whole thing? What are you most proud of when it comes to this book?
So when I went to write this book, and some of you in the audience may be these skeptics, I heard from a bunch of people, including some who have been wonderful posting the book today, sharing the book, who were like, I'm pretty cynical about this friendship stuff, Caroline. And I like you, and I like your concepts, but I'm pretty cynical that this could ever change for me, right? And so I realized that I had to address the cynics, right? And I had to address that this is hard, and it's hard to look at when we haven't wanted to look at it. And so the first chapter is really, why should I do this? And, you know, when I shared it with Ned Hollowell, he was like, this is the thing you needed to do, right? And when I shared it with other people, they gave me advice and they really helped me with it. And you know, we're like, here's all my other cynical things I want you to address, right? So I think that I'm most proud of that because I really don't want to be in fantasy land, right? This has been hard for us. This has been a journey. This is something that's tough to look at. Like, I'm proud that I think this is realistic.
What do you mean by realistic?
Well, hundreds of people have used this advice and made friends. But also, it's realistic in that I'm not pretending that you're picking up this book without that past baggage.
Okay.
Right? Like, it's realistic in that I am speaking to people who I think can relate to the way I'm laying out the information, as opposed to, you know, the airy fairy world that we just don't live in, right? Where we're not carrying all of that.
Yeah. Can I add one more realistic piece? Because you've said it throughout this interview.
Oh, I have. I don't know.
You've been talking about sources and studies this whole time. And that's
love
also why
studies.
it's realistic, right? Like, it's based in science. It's based in the
Right.
study of human behavior and how friends are made and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I really went deep into like, how do people make friends? And then, okay, how do we adapt this for neurodiversity, right? Like, you know, if human beings make friends through shared interest is really my thesis, and through shared experiences and proximity, being in proximity with people repeatedly, then how do we do this neurodivergent style so that it works for us?
So you went deep into the research.
I love research.
What was the most surprising thing that you learned in the course of writing this book?
I went into the dating research because there's not that much, I mean, surprise, surprise, there's not a lot of studies on adults, neurodiverse adults making friends, almost none. And I actually met with 2 different matchmakers.
That's awesome.
And because I started looking at the dating research and I was like, the way people date, romantic stuff aside, you know, is really partly how we make friends. And like, how do people approach dating nowadays? And like, you know, it was a source of information and a source of research. And one of the most surprising things to me was that it's all about shared interest and shared experiences and having that click with someone. And I really was surprised at how much that applied to making friends and how easy it was to use advice and then to have it work. And what I do is I had a group that I ran with like 35 neurodivergent adults, and I would be like, let's try this. Go out this week and like use this advice. And they would try it, and in addition to my clients and other people, and it would work. So, you know, that was one of the things that really surprised me, because I haven't dated since 1996. So.
Wow. 2001 for me. And that kind of brings us to here, right? We're going to wrap up in a second, but it kind of brings us to this bookstore, kind of, sort of. Because one of the things we've talked about a lot as it relates to finding people with shared interests is the importance of a third place.
Yes.
And I think we would be doing a disservice if we didn't at least touch on that a little bit.
We love the third place.
We do.
Do you want me to say what a third place is? Okay, so a third place is something that our parents and our grandparents had that has really disappeared, which is the bookstore, the bowling alley, the American Legion Hall, the coffee shop, the place where you go regularly and you see and interact with people. And this is, not just here in the United States, worldwide. The third place has kind of disappeared. And I'm just as guilty of this. Like, I just watched the new Kevin James movie, like, in my living room. I didn't go to the movie theater, but we used to go to the movie theater. And
Yeah.
what was nice about that wasn't just that we, had people to go with and we interact with them. You ran into people, right? And you saw the same people every Thursday at the bowling league, and so you met and had community with them. And that is a really important piece that I think is also in the research, is that proximity really helps us make friends, seeing the same people repeatedly.
And often, especially now, those third places are based around an interest, right? We've talked a lot
Right.
about comic book stores and bookstores, or going to the gym or a dance class or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest pieces of advice I have in this book is to use interest. Interest is our fuel. It's what keeps us going as neurodivergent people. It's literally what fuels our brain. And so using that to find activities, and they can be online. Like, if you are, sort of nervous, or you feel like that's the community that you connect with, but to have those high interest activities that you join, where you find people who share your interests, because then it's also easier to make that small talk and to have that connection and to have those conversations, because you have a shared language, right? And you have stuff you talk about. And so that also goes back to that third place and just having that.
And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over for Q&As. But before I completely give up the power of the microphone, I just want to share something with all of you here right now. You talked about shared interests. We've been talking about friendship skills for neurodiverse adults here. Some of you in the audience right now might have come in, feeling alone, feeling like, man, I don't fit in, no one gets me, da da da. You're sitting in a room full of people who kind of sort of get it, at least a little bit. And that doesn't mean that any of you have to leave here and like go get a coffee or go to Burdick's and get some chocolate or something. But know that you're not alone. And there's evidence in this room right now that you are not alone. So if anybody came in feeling that way, I just want to give you that little bit of hope that moving forward, you're not all on your own.
And there are neurodivergent spaces that have emerged in the 21 years since I've been coaching that didn't exist 21 years ago. And in those spaces, we really have wonderful community. So I hope that you will come up and talk to me. And when you do, let me write down on a piece of paper some of those groups, because those communities are incredible. And everybody really is supportive, and people are nice. And that's also a place to start, right? So sometimes it's hard to dip your toe in the water, and it's hard to figure things out. I also have in the book, and I want to just say this, one thing you can try today in every single chapter. And I did that because of my cynical friends who were like, I don't know, Caroline. And they are thinking exercises and things you can do, and they are dipping your toe in the water, right? It isn't going out and doing, running in and joining a group today. It's something you can do that makes you feel empowered. And that might be that dipping the toe in the water. Thank you. All right, Q&A.
All right. So the question I had for you is, you were talking about the different levels of friendships. As a practitioner myself, I'm an LMHC. I work in outpatient as well, with a lot of adolescents and some young adults, either on the spectrum or with ADHD. And part of what I do in my work is also looking at boundaries and
Yes.
setting boundaries, maintaining boundaries. And I'm wondering if your levels of friendship that you described is synonymous to the idea of setting and maintaining boundaries, or if it is a little different.
I think that they go hand in hand, right? At first, I just want to say too, I wanted to write a book for teenagers and young adults, but the publishing world felt that that was too narrow a window. all the tips in this book I use personally in my practice with teenagers and young adults, and they work. And the only thing we have to, add is motivation and all those pieces. But I just want to let you know that, since that's what you do. Yeah, I think boundaries and this concept of how much do you share and how much do you give is really inherent in those levels and in my whole discussion, because I talk about building closeness. And, one of the things that I know from working with this population for 21 years is that we often give so much and we don't set personal boundaries, and that means that people take advantage of us. So there's a lot in there about that, and then there's also discussions of lopsided friendships. When you're giving so much and you're not receiving from friends, and friendship breakups, which I hate, and I hate the whole world of ghosting, but I think it's here, sadly. And for so many of the people I interact with in the world, people DM me about it. It is really a thing. And I do think, and I'm not making excuses for the ghoster, but I do think part of what happens with ghosting, we know it's about people don't have the communication skills to have the conversation. And I do think some of that goes back to people don't know how to set boundaries, right? And so instead of setting a boundary or saying, like, I can't give that to you or I can't do it, sadly, they decide to ghost or do something like that, which I don't co-sign, but I think that there's the boundary work comes in there.
So I guess part of that then is it that when you kind of move through the different levels or the different phases or steps to friendship, that then boundary work comes into play?
Yeah, I think it does, because I think that you have to set your own personal boundaries and say, I'm going to share this much, I'm going to give this much, I'm going to say, hey, I can't, I have needs too, and I can't do that for you. And then also respecting people's boundaries and understanding that a boundary is someone setting a limit for themselves. It doesn't mean that they're rejecting you, right? And just to let everyone know, there's a QR code at the back of the book. If you hit the QR code, there's book bonuses and extra material. And that extra material dovetails with a lot of this. So I had to cut 60,000 words from the book last summer because I'm very verbose. But some of the material, I was like, this is so good. I don't want people not to have it. So there's questionnaires and different things.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Do you have parts of your book where you address specifically ADHD versus autism spectrum, or do you feel like your strategies can be employed across that range?
I think both. I do address differences or thoughts or areas where we may be different, right? And then I also think a lot of strategies can be used in many different diagnoses in many different areas. I think one of the things I say in the book is it's tools, not rules. So, this is a suggestion, take it, and then leave the rest, right? And just to give you context, historically, when people talked about social skills, especially for us, they talked about them in a very prescriptive way. And that's what led to masking, right? You must do this in this way. These are the steps, follow them. And my methods are very different than that, because I think then you lose your identity. And also, who am I to say what is correct behavior, right? That's not my job, right? So in that way, there's a little more fluidity in the book. And, I'm using the word neurodivergent instead of, in some cases I do say autistic or ADHD, but I'm also saying you get to figure out what fills your social cup. And when you figure out what works for you, what doesn't, based on your brain, then you can decide what you want to take from this. And that kind of goes to the diagnosis, right? Some people are going to read a section and say, this doesn't apply to me. And another person in a different neurotype might say, this absolutely applies to me. And so that is one way I've dealt with the give and take between different neurotypes.
Can I ask one more? Your book is obviously for a national audience, and yet you speak of knowledge clearly of organizations that might be in this area that would be specific to where neurodivergent adults could meet one another. Is there a primary resource that you could clue us in on the internet, or?
So actually, I was speaking more nationally. I was speaking about online groups. There are groups, and there are places. For instance, Brendan is the chair or somehow in charge of Comic-Con. And that's a space, right? So there are spaces, but when I was speaking of it, I was speaking of 2 or 3 groups that are national, that have literally communities, and they're wonderful. And I've interacted with them a lot, so I can sort of testify to how they are, and I hear from people how they are, because that's always a litmus test, right? People telling you how it really is.
Just because you brought it up. I'm on the board of directors for an event called CalmerCon, CalmerCon. Sounds a lot like Comic-Con because it's a comic book convention / pop culture convention that's intended for neurodiverse folks. So it's built for folks with autism, with ADHD, with sensory processing needs. It's September 12th at the Meadowbrook School in Weston. I'm the keynote this year, and I'm going to be roping Caroline into it shortly. And we're also working on expanding its reach. We're going to probably have one in New York not too long from now. And hopefully it spreads from there. So that's what that is. Another thing I can let people know about that's an online resource is I'm also on the board of directors for the Men's ADHD Support Group, which is a Facebook group, one of the biggest Facebook groups for ADHD out there. And you can Google Men's ADHD Support Group and you'll get the website and all that kind of stuff.
And that was actually one of the places that I was thinking of. It's just a great group, and it's a great space, and it's very supportive, and people have become friends through it. So, there's like a double level to it.
Just trying to understand how we can reconcile this issue of masking. Like, I've been trying to unmask a little bit myself, and it's tough because you unmask, and then sometimes the reaction isn't positive from the friend or someone in your family. And then how do you reconcile with that? Because that makes you think, oh my God, no, I need to be the old way, right? And you want to be authentic to yourself. But like when it comes to family and people that you've known for a long time, you're not going to just throw them to the side if they don't particularly love the new you. You've got to find a middle ground. So I just want to know your thoughts on the middle ground idea.
I love that you asked this question because Brendan and I literally talked about in his podcast, the ADHD Essentials podcast, in the episode that dropped today. Because Brendan always brings up stuff that he's like, we should talk about this. And I was like, yeah, we should. It's something a lot of people struggle with. So here's a few things. As I said, I'm not a fan of ghosting, and I'm not a fan of dropping people, right? Like, I think there are people that you have to let go of because you say over and over again, this is my boundary, or don't say this to me. Absolutely. But I do think as a culture, we're dropping people way too fast, way too often. That's just my personal opinion. But I also think that people don't always know what to make of our changes. And there's something that's happening in our community right now, which is explosive diagnostic rates. And that means that a lot of people are finding out something that they always suspected or wondered about, which is that they are autistic or ADHD or ADHD, which is the ADHD autistic crossover. And so, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are dealing with this just to normalize this. And it's so hard. And I think one of the ways is to understand that we want to communicate about it, right? I think we want to express where we're coming from and to say we're on a journey, and that on that journey, I've realized some things, and I've realized some things I need. And, therefore I'm going to say no more, or I'm going to express. I had a story someone told me in my podcast that was so great about how they had never told someone that they get terrible headaches and that they have all these sensory issues, and that sitting in the bright sun was so hard for them. And that when they finally started saying to people, hey, when we meet for coffee, can we not sit outside? Because here's the effect. Some people were super great and some people weren't receptive. Or some people were like, but we've been sitting having coffee for 30 years and you've never said this. And I think we have to understand that for that person, they're like, why didn't you say anything? Do you think I'm such a monster that I would not have allowed? You know what I mean? They're kind of taken off guard. And I think that's where I love scripts. I know not all neurodivergent people love scripts. If you don't like them, don't use them. I understand. But I love having some phrases in my back pocket to say, I didn't say anything, not because of who you are, because of who I am, right? And so this isn't about you. I'm not making it about you. I've just decided that I need to, be more honest about this because it affects me so much. And to acknowledge that person, because that's one of the things I hear all the time. Yeah, there's the meanies who don't allow us to unmask or who don't like what they see or who aren't kind. But there's also people who are saying, why didn't you tell me this, right? And who don't understand the journey. And I think to have some phrases and sort of say, this wasn't about you, right? I didn't tell you because of where I was. And now I'm on this journey and I've realized this. So it is a hard thing. And I know a lot of families don't get it too, by the way. And that is really difficult because you see them and you interact with them and sometimes they don't get it. And that too, I think goes back to boundaries and sometimes having to set boundaries with people. And also, and this is such a larger picture work, is to come to terms with the fact that them not understanding, and by the way, this is my Achilles heel, my husband's in the audience and he's gonna say, this is something that I always want people to understand. I do, I always want people to understand and take perspective and think about things, and they don't always. And so it's really hard because sometimes people don't join us on the journey, right? And I like to focus on the people who do, right? But it is hard. It is really hard. I get it. Great question.
I came here because I have 2 grandchildren who are neurodivergent. Now, I've been giving them advice or tried to give them. I think maybe just giving them the book is the best thing. But is there a way that I can give them advice? Like my older granddaughter started college. She's going into her senior year. When she started going into her freshman year and she was looking at colleges, I knew she picked the wrong college.
So hard.
And when she was going through the process of looking at colleges, I tried to give her advice about it, but she didn't listen. She had a miserable first year. And now she's, as a junior, she's really happy. She's at UMass. And that's where I tried to get her to go, because I said to her, she knows she's quirky. And I said, you'll find your people there, not in a small school. So, and she did eventually say to me, this year at Thanksgiving, she said, you were right.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Could you say that again loudly?
In front of your parents, too. So is there a way? I mean, I tried, and I have a good relationship with both of them. They really are good. We do get along, and they do listen to me sometimes. But I know, I'm so much older than they are.
I don't think it's about that. I think it's very hard to see some things and have that kind of awareness. It's also hard to admit things. I work with a lot of college students and a lot of them want something that isn't who they are, right? Like they've never partied in their lives and they want to go to a party school, or that's not who they are. I would say the best skill is to use curiosity. So instead of giving advice and telling, to be like, who are your people? Where do you find the most peace and happiness? What environments work for you? Like whatever it is, whether it's, choosing a job or choosing an apartment or choosing a college, to sort of come from curiosity and help them reflect. And they may not say, oh, you were so right away, or even admit that reflection has impact. But I think the more that you help them think about things and have those pensive moments, the more you're helping to hold that mirror up so that they can see themselves, right? And it removes a barrier, because if you give advice, people have to admit that that they have to take that advice and they have to admit things, which is really hard for us as human beings. But self-reflection, although difficult for us, is something where they don't have to budge from their original plan, but you start the wheels turning. And that's what I find with a lot of young people when I'm working with them. They won't ever say like, Caroline, you were right, but they'll start the wheels turning, and then eventually they'll say, I'm realizing my people, are this way, or I'm realizing that, I need certain environments. And I'm helping them also develop a skill, because I want them to be their own, witness. And I have a thing in the book about, looking at what you really are about. And I think that's a big piece of what you're talking about, right? Is finding your people is partly who are you, right? And doing some work around that. So keep it up, just shift a little bit.
Okay, well, I'll read the book before I do.
Okay, definitely read the book before you do.
Thank you so much, Caroline and Brendan, for joining us tonight. Thank you again for coming out tonight.